Welcome to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm your host, Pam Rader, and I'm here with a dear friend and spiritual teacher of mine, Jaromyr Kynl. Jaro and I met several years ago when he reached out to come and possibly teach some yoga at my studio. And it was a very serendipitous meeting for me. When you reached out, Jaro, I just thought you were another dude looking for, to get on a yoga schedule. But for my listeners, Jarl went a little further. He asked if we could meet for coffee. And he walked into this coffee shop with this long flowing hair and these piercing blue eyes and looked like something out of the biblical times and had this energy around him. And he sat down and I think we talked for like 2 hours. It was so just really moving and intense. And I thought, this guy has something really special. He became one of my teachers. And I'm so, so grateful to have you on the podcast today, Jarl, and to talk about all things spiritual and particularly how we can integrate spirituality into our everyday lives. So, I got a question for you. First and foremost, how does a guy from Drayton Valley, Alberta, wind up with a man bun and Malabeats?
Well, I'm not from Drayton Valley, first of all. Yeah, how I made my way here, only God knows. But yeah, no, thank you for the introduction. Very kind of you. And I found our energy just so complementary in so many ways. And we get such great meaning out of our conversations and connections. So I truly appreciate that. And yeah, you make me think in ways that I wouldn't normally. And I find that deeply impactful and meaningful and purposeful. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, how do we integrate spirituality into daily life? I think this is something that anyone who gets into the like quote unquote spiritual realm ends up contemplating, and I've watched enough spiritual teachers and listen to students ask questions wondering, like, Guruji, when I'm at your ashram, everything is perfect and blissful and I can maintain this space. But when I go out, with my family into the real world, how do I, maintain this? And I find this question is brought up so many times. It's probably the predominant question that comes up. And I've contemplated it for a long time too. And like lately, I've been really contemplating actually another question. And it's like, what is the difference? And is there a difference between grace or destiny and free will? And I think this really touches on something fundamental. It's like the universe and the cosmos has been unfolding since time immemorial. And who knows if it's even linear? Our brains and our minds are limited at such a small spectrum of what is knowable, even our senses. And
so I just want to pause because I think you have done so much spiritual study and you have been a seeker yourself for a long time. Why don't we start with just share a little bit about your journey into becoming a seeker of truth, a seeker of this spiritual path. I know that you went to India seeking something at some point. Why don't you share a little bit about that so that our listeners really get an idea of who you are and where you're coming from?
Yeah, I think you can tell I get caught on tangents really easily. So I think like a lot of people, we enter the spiritual path because there's some feeling of disconnect or dis-ease or suffering or, like wondering like, what's the point of life? And from quite a young age, I definitely experienced that. And just was wondering like, why is there so much, perceived suffering in life? So I think that from an early age really drew me into looking into, why we're here, and contemplating death. I was really interested in death from a young age, not in a morbid way, but just like, well, what is that? What comes into this body and what leaves this body? Which drew me towards, anything from shamanism to, Eastern theology. And when I found yoga and Buddhism and this kind of thing, it really started to ring true for me. And your question about my trip, what brought me to India?
Sure. Yeah. What made you, were you in a state of dis-ease or suffering and searching for something, or just really curious?
Well, I mean, yes.
Mhm.
And yeah, yes to all of that. I think what really drew me to India was like when I was really young, maybe in high school at some point, I saw pictures of these beings, these like saints, and I didn't really even know they were saints. And they were always like sitting on the ground or like in some like cross-legged position or something, and there'd be people gathered around them, and I'd be just like, well, what's going on there? Like, there seems to be something special there, something unique, and I couldn't quite place it. Um, and and then I, through inquiry, I started to come closer and closer to these teachings, to these truths, to these teachers. And originally, I wanted to go to India to go to Bodh Gaya, the place of Buddha's enlightenment. And then years passed, and I got really into yoga. And then I wanted to go to India to go to the Mahakumbh Mela, which is the largest gathering of people on the planet. And it happens every 4 years, and it rotates to different places in India. And every 12 years is the big one. Every 144 years is the big one. And so I went to go to the Kumbh Mela and to bathe in the Ganga and to go to the source of yoga. I kind of had a feeling that there was something more to yoga than what was being portrayed in the West. And I already thought I had a good idea of it. And then when I went to India, I was just like a deer in the headlights, for so many reasons. And on my 27th birthday, I was in Prayagraj, which is where the confluence of the Ganga, the Yamuna, and the Saraswati are. These three rivers. One runs underground, and they're symbolic macro of the Ida Pingala and Sushumna Nadi meeting in the Agnya Chakra. And on the auspicious days, they say if you bathe there, your samskaras, vasanas, karmas will be cleansed, and your families, and your whole village. And it's so like you'll get up to like 90 million people attending over the course of like a month and a half. And people get killed, and there's like stampedes and stuff. But I met one of my great teachers and a guru of mine, Narvada Puri Mataji, at the Kumbh Mela on my 27th birthday. When I met her, it was like I still remember her face. It's just like kind of like radiating like the sun, and immediately she just a gentle smile, and I felt like we knew each other for lifetimes.
Mhm.
And immediately I felt at home. And I spent a month and a half or so with her, went back to her ashram in Haridwar and did practices, studied the Yoga Sutras, would do the pujas and the yagyas and arati and all these things. And then eventually made my way to Rishikesh and I serendipitously ended up going to satsangs with Muji Baba. And that has been truly transformative too. Yeah, so I mean, there's so much in between that and since then, but try not to
Mhm.
get lost in all
No,
the
but
details.
yeah, I mean, you did the real thing. You left everything behind. You went to India. You sought out a teacher. You found a spiritual connection with someone you felt drawn to, and you sat at the feet of a guru. And there was some transmission there, and
Oh yeah.
it altered you and changed you, and you have carried those teachings forward in your life. But then you come back to Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and it's much like, yeah, it's all great at the ashram, but then like, how do I not? I was just telling Yarrow before we got on the call that I just got off of a call with Fortis BC, and the girl was extremely rude to me, and my patience was so low today, and I immediately was like, "Let me speak to your supervisor." That was the best ahimsa that I could do, non-harming. Just let me talk to someone else. So living in the real world is a challenge. It's like when people ask me all the time, well, Pam, I meditate fine at home, but as soon as I get, if there's noise or if I'm distracted, then I can't meditate. And I say, well, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And I believe that the point of this, of all of this spiritual seeking, is that we find some integration. It's not to separate us from the world. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that is like a very profound, reflection, and very applicable for everyone. I think there is no separation between the two. It's in the yoga world, we'll say, like, bringing your practice off the mat, right?
Mhm.
And that is when the practice is really becoming like something you're doing. When you're doing your meditation and your asana and all these like internal arts, we are cultivating something, and it needs to be applied in our interactions with our loved ones, at work, in the community. And that's when the real work begins. There's like the practice, and then there's the work, and you can say it's all work, it's all practice, it's all just semantics and language we're using. But yeah, and I think too, yeah, when I came back from India, it was like, okay, now what am I going to do, right? I actually took a 4-week vow of silence in India, and it ended up being 6 weeks. And I almost decided to like never speak again because it was just so much nicer. It was just so much, so much unnecessary stuff. And then I thought my parents would think that I went insane. And by Western accounts, you could probably think that, and it'd be really hard. So I started speaking again, and came back. And actually, the thing is my mom thought I would become like an ascetic and just go live in a cave, covered in ash for the rest of my life or something. And I actually like the niceness of having a warm home and clean water and nice clothes and food, and all these things. So, and also to have all those things, we need to work, we need to engage in the world. And it's, another saying that I often, or somewhat often say, is it's not all unicorn farts and rainbows,
Yeah.
right?
My friend Ryan Lear, who you probably know of, he's a brilliant yoga teacher, a dear friend of mine, and he tells a story about a gentleman who wanted to become an ascetic, and he goes to live in a cave, and all he had was a loincloth, and then he would go and take his bowl and beg for food during the day. And there was a rat that kept eating his loincloth. And so he was talking with someone in the town, and they said, you know what, you should get a cat to control the rat. So he brings the cat in to control the rats, but then he had to feed the cat, and
Yeah.
he didn't have any milk for the cat. So he had to go beg for milk for the cat. And eventually someone said, well, I've got a cow that you could take and get the milk from the cow for the cat. So now he has a cat and a cow to take care of in this cave. And then he eventually can't take care of both of them. So he goes into the town, and someone says, my daughter is of the eligible age, and she could come and take care of that and milk the cow for you and make you meals. And so all of a sudden he's a householder with all of these things. And he goes back to his teacher and tells him what happened. He said, I was supposed to be up in the mountains and in a cave and with nothing, but then there was this rat, and the teacher just laughed, and he said, well, there was a simple solution. You should have got rid of the loincloth.
Right.
And but isn't that like, it's so like aptly what we experience? We go through these periods of I want this, and then it requires that I take care of it, and we get on more and more and more things that require more effort and more stress to take care of. And I don't know about you, but personally, like, I'm in my 50s now, and I think I spent my 20s and 30s kind of wanting things,
Mm.
my 40s getting things, and now in my 50s I'm thinning out I want less to take care of. And I think that letting go is the spiritual path that we all get to at some point.
Yeah. Well, for some people, letting go is the medicine, and for some people, acquiring may be the medicine. And I think the real challenge, and I'm not a master at this, is to not be so attached to the things and not push things away. Like, because we can get caught up in like, I need to get rid of everything. To be spiritual, I need to sleep on the ground, and my house is too big. I got to downsize my house, and it's like, well, what is that causing? That's causing mental turbulence, some kind of excitement in the mind, which is fine. Again, it's all part of the unfolding of consciousness in this incarnation in our life. So I think, to get really practical, though, I think, we're living everyday life. Like, we're doing dishes, we're taking the garbage out, we're going to work, we're waking up, realizing we don't have matching socks for that day and dealing with it. And
Yeah. And we're getting like, I'm getting divorced. I didn't
yeah,
see that coming. Like, that's real life. It's a big thing. You're
yeah,
going through some changes in your own life that are kind of big deal. And then here we are.
yeah, no, exactly. So it's like a willingness to keep showing up, right? Um to shine light into the dark places and be willing to be with it. Like I was contemplating what love is,
Mhm.
and I still think about it, and I feel like love in a big way is like an openness to our experience, right? People are like, oh, well, what is love? And I think it's like a mother's womb is like holding the baby, right? Fully,
Mhm.
all of it in its entirety.
Mhm.
And like the Mother Earth holds us like that in a big way, and we can learn to love like that. And it's not to say that we don't stand up against injustices and things like this, but we can learn to have a greater capacity to be with what is, and to be with our pain and other people's pain. And often, instead of turning away from pain or avoiding things that we don't like, if we can sit with it, it dissolves in some way and it becomes sweeter. It becomes, more beautiful in a sense. Um,
I would love to just share this because this is exactly what I thought. My marriage came apart very suddenly. I didn't expect it, and all of a sudden there it was. And I was so grateful for these practices. But there's my higher consciousness that knows of these practices, and then my very human part was like,
yeah,
ugh,
yeah,
you know. But I had this theory that, we can experience joy and pain and suffering and even ecstasy at the same time, if we're open, as you say. Like, love is being open to all of those things. And I had this idea that I think that, and I don't know this, but I think pain is sort of quantitative. There's a certain amount kind of allotted to a loss, if you will. And if I stuff it down and don't connect to it and just try to put on a brave face and make everything okay, it's like a steady drip, an intravenous drip of that pain over a long period of time. It's like a slow poison and a slow drain on my vitality. And so I was like, I'm committed to being authentic. And we've connected quite a bit over this last month or so. And I've been walking as authentically as I can in the suffering of it and all of that. But I went out into the forest and I looked up at the sky and I actually said, fuck you, come at me. Come at me. Like, you think that's going to take me out? Like, let me feel it all. And it was kind of nasty, just the yucky inside of me. But I fell to my knees and I just let myself feel like searing pain. And I sat there until it passed and then I laughed. And I did that for a few days, like, and it got less and less. And now I feel like I can hold all of it with love. I really can. And I'm not saying that everyone should do that, because I think that our capacity to hold discomfort is different for each person in different seasons of our lives. And I've done a lot of work to have a pretty massive capacity for discomfort. Um, but I loved the experiment of it, because at no time in there did I lose love for myself, for my husband, for what we had, for what, like, my future, all of it. And the pain was there. It was like the totality of the human experience
yeah,
magnified. And there was something really terrible and really beautiful about it at the same
yeah.
time. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that makes huge sense. It's like something I've been thinking about too is like it seems like an analogy that's really applicable to life is like life is like a dance of how well we're able to hold a dichotomy or polar opposites in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, like on the topic of love, we're so used to like the hallmark, like Hollywood sort of version of what love is. And
Mm.
the thing is I think love is so much, offers so much more than that. And the English language is a bit limited too. Like we have like one word and it's like, I love my pen. I
Yeah.
I love my dog. I love my whatever, right? And so I think love has so many like ranges,
Aren't there
but
like 700 words for love in Sanskrit or something?
yeah, I mean, like likely something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of this is an inevitable topic if we're talking about how to live spirituality, is like there has been the fall of so many gurus lately in the past decade, I would say.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that these are terrible people, or that they're fundamentally flawed, or they stepped out into the world to do harm. I believe that they just had trouble integrating their very human desires and the power that gets handed over. I think that any human being that's handed that much power will eventually be corrupted in the right circumstances. What can you say about that? Because there's a lot of people who are really not trusting. They're moving away from. They're either spiritually bypassing or moving away from spirituality because it's a sham. And that, look at what that guy did. And I think I hate for a few individuals to poison the well for all of us.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like we're giving our power away to others. Like, if we look at the word guru, like, what does it mean? Right? It means essentially from darkness to light, or shining light into the dark spaces, kind of a thing. You know, that word, you can explore it. It's very deep. And so, we are the ones, going through whatever we're going through. And and the guru is like, can act as like a catalyst to help. It's like when a fruit is ripe, it will fall off the tree with a mere breeze,
Mm-hmm.
or it's ready to be picked.
Mm-hmm.
And so the guru doesn't, I don't know, the external guru is something, but we put too much power in the external world. So there's a few points here, I think, to this topic, or many points. And but I think too, like, we're always looking for someone else to blame, another group, another person, them, that religion, that country, that society,
Yeah, and when we give our power away to a human being, to a person that we perceive to be in power, that's an insurance policy for us. So if this goes sideways, it's not my fault.
right. Yeah, that's a great reflection. And I think there is use to having an external guru too. And it reminds me of something I heard. I think it's one of the Tibetan traditions, and they talk about how you can only be alive in this physical body for so long if you were like purely sattvic, if you were like had no karmas left, right? So every being, every body, every human has a huge storehouse of karma, or of samskaras, which produce the karmas and the things we do in our tendencies, or
So for
vasana.
people who are listening who don't know what samskaras are, share that with them.
Yeah, so if you want to talk about karma, which by the way is like very, very loosely defined, like there's no text that specifically talks about karma. And it is very diverse. And if you listen to swamis talk about it, who are heads of specific schools in India, um, it is a very deep topic. But there's three things that are connected with karma. So samskaras are like these deep rooted pathways that we have within our mental, energetic body, and they produce vasanas, which are tendencies. So if you have a tendency to be, I like the color red, or
Mm-hmm.
I like this flavor, or I tend to have this disposition, that comes from vasanas, which are this storehouse of energy, of impressions in our mental, the akash, in that space.
So samskaras are kind of like the subconscious seeds, and
Yeah,
then the vasanas are like the traits that arise, and we do the habits that we do over and over again that then reinforce those
that,
subconscious
that
beliefs.
create karmas, which are the actions, the words, the deeds, which create impressions. Those impressions, when the situation is right, create vasanas, tendencies, which create karmas, which create samskaras. So it's
Right.
this,
So just
you
like
know,
a hamster wheel.
well, that's samsara, right?
Yeah.
That's like the cyclical sort of like realm of suffering, which also has two, you could say it's like Durga in a sense would be like the Sattvic version, and like Maya would be the version of like creating illusion and suffering. So the whole realm of the material world and the phenomenal existence of mind, emotions, relationships, the physical body can either, elevate the being or kind of bring you down into the mud, into samsara. But to kind of come back, we were talking about karmas and gurus. So every person has karmas, latent impressions, stored from this life and previous lives. We all have conditioned minds, and we're all human beings too. We all have desires, and um, we can be corrupted, and there's countless stories in the ancient Indian scripts of great high level yogis, and they have one tiny thought of desire, and all of a sudden they just like fall to the deepest realms of hell for like 10, twenty
Yeah.
thousand years, and then they like work their way back up just to work through that one last thing. So nothing's ever as it truly seems. I mean, you know what? If you're being abused and you recognize that something needs to stop and change, it needs to stop and change. And there is a potential risk that we're running, in a sense, by the thing is, it's all in the individual. If we blanket term anything and you go, oh, that whole system is screwed because that one group did something that we didn't
Yeah.
appreciate, then
because I hear a lot, like I have one of my sons is very rigid about certain things, and he thinks that everything from A Course in Miracles to yoga to everything, it's all a cult and it's all BS. And he's just really, he loves to be against certain things, and he doesn't
Yep.
listen to this. He's, he throwing out the baby with the bathwater is what I think of it as.
Yeah.
Like I recall coming up through the Baptiste system, my teacher Baron would often say, "Do not put me on a pedestal because I will disappoint you. I am just a man.
Yeah.
I'm sharing teachings. Do what you will with them. But
Mhm.
I am nobody special. I'm just a man." And I took that to heart, whereas a lot of other people that were in a room with me let that go over their head, and they idolized and put him on a pedestal. Of course, eventually he was human and came under a lot of scrutiny. But it was interesting to me to see the shift, because I had been in the room with the people that were bringing the scrutiny, and I saw them clamoring over each other, climbing on top of each other's heads, trying to get close to Baron.
Mhm.
And then when he falls, all of a sudden they're after him. And I was like, whoa, like just as a metaphor for how we can be as human beings, like the bandwagon and all of that. And I think that in a spiritual conversation, one of the most important words that we can explore is discernment.
Mhm.
And it's like, who am I in this? What does that mean to me? How will I use this in my life? How does this align with my internal compass and my truth? What are my responsibilities here? But
Yeah.
too often people hand their power, follow it blindly, then it doesn't work for them. And that now we're going to draw the weapons. And I think that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths for spirituality when there are so many beautiful, pure practices and pathways that could lead people home.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very well said. There's so many points in that. What you just have, we can explore, go into so many realms. Yeah, I think at this point in humanity, human beings need to take responsibility for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't to excuse certain things that have happened, but it's like a calling for us to start to acknowledge that we have a say in our reality, and the meaning we give the things we go through, and it's incredibly empowering. It's also a little scary because that means we have to take responsibility, right? We recognize that we are actually, the ones who are responsible. So I think it can be a little bit scary to recognize it. And you know what? Human beings often rally over things they dislike. It's much easier to do that, like to get
Mm-hmm.
into a group of people and talk about things that aren't, that you don't like. And then also, I think there's the negativity bias, which is kind of wired into us, into our nervous system, from who knows how long ago, when we were living in caves, and we had to be hyper vigilant if there was a tiger or whatever coming, right, or the other tribe. So But I think, we're at a place now where we don't have to be stuck in those lower three realms, the lower three chakras, um, and it's challenging too, right? Like society is, or social media encourages, like, money, sex, power, and it's like
Yeah.
bottom three chakras, and it's like all consumerism, right? Um, so yeah, I think, like, even I'm not like super apt on all on the, like, the whole Christian theology in that, but the next coming, I think it would be like all of us recognizing the spirit of Christ within us, and
Yeah.
like,
My friend Joe Foxstreamer often says, you can be Jesus, you can be Buddha, you can be him or them or more than that. And that's really what the next coming is about, is us recognizing our own power. Now, the born agains are going to cancel me, but they don't follow me anyway, so it's okay.
oh yeah, I mean, that just speaks again to what we were talking about, right? Like, it's just so easy to tear people down. But for me, there was
Well,
a there's yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, not to bring any names into this, but some people who are part of a very Christian group that feel that me teaching yoga is breathing the devil's air. They were part of my husband's family, and when they found out that we were splitting up, that my husband left, they came after me like vile, horrible things, and I thought, is that Christianity? Like, whoa. No,
No,
like,
it's
no,
not.
thank you. It's not.
No, yeah.
But it's like what you said, a group of people coming together to um, complain about what they don't like, giving their power away. And that's another example of it. It's like I'm okay with it. I'm like, oh, whoa, like you showed me who you are. That's all fine. But another example of why we need to be discerning, because if I took that and said that's what Christianity is, I would never be able to extol some of the beautiful virtues from Christianity and explore some of the beauty and the grace and the loveliness of it, because I think every road leads home.
Yeah. Well,
And so we have to kind of weed through the muck.
yeah. Well, in every group of people, there's going to be an asshole,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And some
Yeah.
we're assholes,
Yep.
right? And it's like, there's a few things I want to touch on. Like, when you're panning for gold, there's nuggets in there. You don't just be like, I can't. The whole river, the banks, it's all just a bunch of, like, it's not useful. But you go in there and you pan for it, right? And you find the nuggets that are applicable for our life. There was a Sanskrit term. It's a sarva jnana, and like jnana is like wisdom or knowledge of the self or truth. But the sarva jnana is like all pervasive, omniscient. It's like the thread that unifies all things. And from a very young age, that is what I was looking for. Is like, if there is truth, then it must be universal, right? And
Yeah, it would have to be that. It couldn't otherwise it's not truth.
exactly. And it doesn't need defending, or it's like, that's one of the things I love about yoga theology and philosophy and spirituality and the sadhana, the practice, the way of life, is the more we are in aligned with it, the more life is an example of what truth is. And I'd venture to say that truth is very similar to what love is, right? It's like, that's why we have like ahimsa and satya. It's like nonviolence and truth, and they all have to abide in the first, right? Like how the yamas and niyamas in the Yoga Sutras work is that the first one, everything else has to fit under that umbrella. So ahimsa, non-violence, all the other things, truthfulness, non-stealing, all these things have to fit under that. If they come out of the realm of ahimsa, of non-violence, then they're no longer part of the system. But what I'm saying here too, and to get back to kind of our whole point of what we were talking about, how to integrate spirituality with daily life, it's like, in the Hatha Yoga, they talk about cleaning your house, having a nice room, having a conducive space to practice, cleaning the body, doing pranayama, doing these techniques that purify the external body, purify the nervous system, the energetic system, then start working more subtly and subtly with the mind and with your concentration. and then eventually, finding this union or this yoga. So, it's the practice of spirituality and life. It's they're not separate. I think this is like the main theme of what we're talking about. It is, and it takes an infinite amount of forms. Like the amount of postures, the amount of asanas are as many as there are forms of life, and all the things that they do throughout their life, right? So
Well,
I think.
you said something there about the yogic teachings, like spirituality in the real world, and I want to break it down a little bit more concretely. Even you said like cleanliness. So sausha is like one of the principles of yoga. One of the niyamas means cleanliness. But I look at something like that and I'm like, well, what do I need to clean up? I can clean my room and still have terrible thoughts about people.
Mhm.
And so to clean up how I think about other people, how I speak to myself, to clean up my doubts and really truly walk in faith, and to take responsibility, to say I'm sorry, to
That were good.
this idea of cleaning up. I think that living spirituality in daily life for me is taking an inventory of what I need to clean up in my relationships, because our life on the planet is about our relationships with, first of all, our relationship to self, our relationship to nature around us, and then our relationship to other people and our relationship to God, our source. And so for me, I'm like, what do I need to clean up with the people around me? Is there an apology owed? Is there a clarification that needs to happen? Have I been thinking poorly about someone else, and could I pray for them instead? Where could I release doubts? And so like cleaning up the landscape of my mind is sort of where I start spirituality in my life. And then I also bring in the practices of gratitude, as a daily practice. Appreciating people, speaking appreciation into the world, I think is one of the greatest spiritual practices, highly underused.
Yep.
It transforms how we see the world, and it transforms how we feel when we're in the company of other people. So I think sometimes people think spirituality is like, saying a mantra and counting mala beads, or practicing yoga for 6 hours a day, or studying the Yoga Sutras. But to me, it's as simple as kindness, the very first principle of yoga, ahimsa. And then starting with like my thoughts, my words, my deeds, and where have I been out of alignment with that? And to me, I think that's where I'm at in my life right now. The highest spiritual practice is trying to operate in the world so that kindness is who I am, and my loving is who I am, no matter how someone else presents themselves around me. And when I'm unable or unwilling to be loving in that moment, that's my spiritual practice, is like, why? To dig in and go, what is it? Where's my judgment for that person? What is that really about? And it can be as simple as that. To me, that's a very high spiritual practice in real life, to take an inventory each day. Where could I do better?
Yeah, and not just for others, for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's one thing I've been really working with too. And this morning when I was sitting and I was watching my thoughts, I was like, how much energy is spent in this like chatter about finances, relationships, living situations, all this stuff, and that's all great things, but it's like so often we're just caught up in these unnecessary narratives about things and people, and maybe not even inspecting it, and I think that's where like self inquiry, really checking in with who we are and what we do and what we value, really comes into play. And one, I came up with this term like relational alchemy. I don't know if I came up with it, but
It
and
occurred
it's,
to you.
yeah. And it's really like, because I've been thinking about the synthesis between like what I'm very familiar with, which is like the more maybe esoteric, like Eastern yogic traditions, and what you're sharing, in the Become the Catalyst course. This is like, and it's really bringing the two worlds together. Like, of course, yoga includes like ahimsa and speaking the truth and all these things. But like the stuff that you're offering really unpacks it at like such a profound level of the intricacies of how to work through all those details. Something like the Yoga Sutras is actually very cryptic, and
Mm-hmm.
you need a teacher to unpack it. And the things that you offer, and the methods and the ways to reframe things, I've just found to be so valuable. And it's like nothing's like completely linear either, right? It's not just like this, then this, then this. It's like it's all connected. Chances are, if you're managing to have a nice, like a clean home, clean body, eating well, reading good things, listening to good, positive like movies, if you watch movies, reading good books, listening to like, positive music, that's all external stuff. But if you're doing those things, chances are you're going to be more kind to others. You're going to be more patient for yourself and others. And, and then if you're sitting and you're doing your meditation, you're cleaning out your mind, chances are you're going to gravitate to having a cleaner space, to eating better, to treating, so it's all, it's like a fractal, each point connects to all of them. So if you focus on one completely, all of them are available. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, that's what Krishna talks about too. It's like all the forms of yoga, when you become fully proficient in any one, you have access to all of them. They're not separate. The separation is in the novice's mind.
Yeah. I like to take the yogic teaching. I like to look at all spiritual teachings. I've studied the Tao and a little bit of Buddhism and the Gita and the sutras, and and read a lot of just like Western yoga books, etc. And the one thing that I have noticed, I grew up in the United Church and did a lot of Sunday school and all of that. But what I started to notice, my mind works really interestingly. I started to notice the threads. I always picture like the old CSI series where they have like the strings on the board connecting all the things. And I could just in my mind see how the threads of truth were all the same. Like, and so I would decode how it's the same as, and I just used like the Baptiste methodology as the measuring stick for it, just as like as a place to come back to, because I was familiar with it.
Yep.
But when I got really curious and started investigating it, I was like, there's nothing different. The truth in all of these things is to seek the truth, to be kind, and to basically do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. Like that's really all of it in a nutshell. And we can stop splitting hairs and just start looking like we look often, like you say, externally. It's great to have those external. I think it's good to have external markers for us, and sometimes teachers or mentors to let us know when we're off the path.
Yeah.
And to expand our capacity to question. And that's something that you really did for me, was expanded my capacity to question and to let in other teachings without fear.
Yeah.
And I think that when we start seeing all those connections, we don't have to be afraid of any particular discipline, and we can realize we are spiritual beings, all of us, and we're all spiritual in our own way. And we can start looking at like, how is that spiritual? How does that connect to something greater? How do I feel when I'm doing this thing? When I go out for a walk in nature, why do I feel so much better? When I eat healthy food, my body feels better and I notice I'm less impatient. Or like you're saying, all of these things, if we start to really dive into it, everything we do is spiritual and it's all connected.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're never off your path.
Mm-hmm.
Those moments where you feel totally disconnected, when your brain is scattered, your thoughts are all over the place, your emotions are just a train wreck. That is, every moment is the entry point, and the beginner's mind is the master's mind. The beginner's mind is when all possibilities are open, when everything is a doorway to new potential. And I really feel like this also speaks to what it means to be present, to learn to be available to what is happening in every moment. Um, you know?
Yeah, presence. It's really, I think the most spiritual practice is presence. Just, I can eat the healthy food, but if I'm not present to it, I'm not present to the fact that it makes my body feel better. And then when my body feels better, that I'm kinder. But when I get present, I start to make all those connections, and I can do more of those things on purpose and live a more awakened life.
Yeah.
And I think that every discipline has some version of know the truth and the truth shall set you free. But in the active seeking of truth, we're automatically present, I think.
Yeah, just to sort of touch on what I was kind of exploring the very beginning of our conversation, it's like there is a natural intelligence to life, and that is our essence. And that essence is informing every aspect of life. Everything is unfolding with this connection to that essential life force, and there's such an intelligence there. And when we can learn to be more present, to pay attention to the sense of the life force within our body, within each breath, we can start to tune in to that intelligence, and our mind can start to be actually informed by that intelligence. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and another thing that came up so strongly as we're talking, and it's been such a powerful medicine for me, is like really, yeah, relations are so important. As much as it is important for us to go inwards and to do our internal work, as it is important to recognize that there is an interconnectedness, there's an interdependence, there's an interbeing, and that we're not separate. To think that, another analogy is like the tree is not separate from the forest is not separate from the earth is not separate from the cosmos, and we're not separate from any of those things. And so when you start to recognize this interdependence, that nothing exists independently, separate from other things, there becomes like a wisdom, actually. Like that is like the dawning of higher wisdom within the Buddhist tradition, is recognizing that interdependence. And when you start to see that we actually, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, and then we start to understand the mechanisms of, the chasing after things and avoiding things and the pain, and it's kind of an unnecessary struggle, we recognize the interdependence and interconnectedness of all things, we gain not only wisdom and insight into the nature of reality, but we gain compassion and empathy for others, because we recognize that we're not so different. If you're experiencing pain
Yeah.
and anger and sadness and fear, other people are also experiencing that. So we can gain compassion for ourselves and others.
And I find that really healing. Like, I mean, there are some practices that are specifically around that, but I know for me, when there's a very particular pain that heartbreak is, right? Like
Yeah.
and I think every human being has experienced that, or they will experience it.
Yeah.
And when it came for me again, I was like, oh, it's been a long time. Oh, but I remember that very specific. And then I had this thing wash over me. Like, I think I lost touch with it. That's what that feels like for other people.
Mm.
And I had this whole wave of compassion wash over me, and really just thought about people in my life that had gone through divorce and separation and different things over the years, where maybe I intellectually understood, but inwardly maybe couldn't connect with the level of compassion because I'd forgotten, you
Yeah.
know? And so, yeah, understanding that on two levels. So there's that one, I get more compassion for others, but then also it alleviates my suffering and pain to think about all the people. There's 8 billion people on this planet. How many of them are going through something similar to what I'm going through or what you're going through right now? Like, so many people. And it's oddly comforting.
Yeah.
And so recognizing our interconnectedness, I think, is a really important practice. And yet we are taught, we are conditioned into the greatest disease of mankind, which is I'll do it myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Independence and separation.
It's acting like a cancerous cell, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't, if we had a town full of all blacksmiths, we would not thrive back in the day. You need a baker, and you need a banker, and you need a carpenter, and we all need each other. And when we try to be all things for ourselves or for another person, I think we cut ourselves off from all the beauty of life.
Yeah, that's like speaking to the unity and the diversity, and the
Mm-hmm.
dancing with dichotomy. Like, how gracefully can we dance with the dichotomy of life?
I
And
love that.
yeah.
Wait, so talk about I can't have you on here and not hear what you have to say about spiritual bypassing.
Oh yeah, I'm very
Yeah.
familiar with this. And I keep coming back to this thought I had about in the beginning about grace, versus destiny, or free will versus destiny, or fate, right? Um, I think, like, can you predict what your next thought will be? You can have a probably good, decent idea, like based on your past, remembering an unconscious future, so to speak. But I think we're if we are truly a part of life, which we are, it's like undeniable. Um, and it's been unfolding since, countless hundreds and tens of thousands of years, who knows, beyond time itself. Um, we are this unfolding. So even in our despair, even in our darkest moments, our life is a miracle, and our
Mhm.
life is just unfolding, and we're not separate. I think this is something that we're really suffering from in a big way, is this sense of like separation and like loneliness. Like, how many
Mhm.
people are lonely, and there's like people all over the place. We have
Yeah.
more connection or more methods to connect than ever, but we feel more isolated and separate and than ever, it seems like.
And then people go into that separation and they might find spirituality, but they're afraid of the vulnerability. Then this is getting back to the spiritual bypassing. My take on this is that people sometimes use spirituality as a place to hide and to stay separate, to keep people at arm's length from them. It's all good, love, light, and
Oh,
rainbows. And it's a way that we don't let other people see our suffering or our doubt or our fear or our pain. And it's just it can be a cover up. And it's very much to everyone's detriment. I would way rather if
yeah,
I ask
yeah,
someone, how are you? And they say, I just had my heart torn out. I would way rather be like, whoa, let's sit and like jam at it. I want to hear about that versus fine. How are you? Or you know what? Life has brought me challenges, but I'm working through it because I have my practice. Like, you know what? Fuck that. I want to hear why it sucks for you and be real about it. And yeah, we'll get to that. That's the end chapter of any trial, is the triumph when we realize that we can make it be
yeah.
what we want. But when you're in the middle of it, there's a battle going on in your psyche that, if you try to cover that up, I think we prolong the battle.
Yeah, really great points, and you had to come back around to what you actually asked me about spiritual bypassing. I think I almost did it there. Um, I think, yeah, it's like we can almost like zoom out too much with when we go into the spiritual, like, we are all one. I am not my thoughts. I am not my emotions. I am not my body. All these things are transitory. In the yoga tradition that you consider truth, this is how you define truth: that which is not changing. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, anything else that is witnessed to be changing is not true. So ultimately, this is true, but on a relative level, we have a very relative experience of things coming and going, relationships, and those are all very important on the relative level. And so it's important to not bypass those and just go, well, because the thoughts are coming and going, because the emotions are coming and going, I don't need to deal with those, and I don't need to take responsibility for my thoughts, for my actions, for my words. And if we have a hard experience with a relationship, and relationships are the perfect ground for practicing, what we, to really see where we are in our practice. And relationships are triggering as all heck. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's bound to bring up all the samskaras, all the vasanas, all the karmas, and it's, yeah, so it's really important to, as much as it is to go into that place within you, that essential part of you which is unchanging, it is your true nature. And it's important to go into the realm of the ever changing. It's like Shiva is like the consciousness or awareness, and Shakti is the phenomenal world, and together they dance and they make this whole thing beautiful. Like, and there's another thing I want to bring up, and it's like bringing the imagery of the cross into this,
Mm-hmm.
where the horizontal, we talked about this a few times, I think, where the horizontal realm, the realm of becoming, the realm of relationships, of space and time, of thoughts and phenomena. And then you have the vertical realm, which is the realm of spirit, of consciousness, of awareness. And even in the Kabbalah, which is mystic Judaism, they talk about the whole point of life is to breathe spirit into the physical matter, into this flesh, into the body. And this is the whole point of life. This is the dance we're doing. This is the dichotomy. And this is the quality of guru, of shining a light into the darkness, so that it's not about necessarily transcending life and just like escaping this realm. Some practices are about that, but I think it's more important to actually show up with a bleeding heart and just love the world and embrace it all. And through that, there is this like ascension process.
Yeah, so beautiful. So, Yarrow, where can people find you? Because first of all, I want to actually, before I ask that, so I worked with Yarrow for a while, and through storytelling, he taught me so much, and I remember most of what you taught me because you have such a heart for it, and it's truth coming from you, and you were so generous, but also it just comes alive in you. You have a way of sharing wisdom where it's very alive for people. And so anyone out there who wants to know more about spiritual teachings, yoga, how to live your life with them, and how to integrate spirituality into your day-to-day life. If someone's interested in that, how do they find you? Where do they find you? Can they follow you?
Yeah. So I have all, like, the Facebook and Instagram. And my most recent offering is really trying to synthesize this whole gamut of, the coaching, interpersonal relationship communication aspects, with the realm of the spirit, with your true self. And I've termed it so far soul path guidance. Really like uncovering what your stories are and the impact that narration has on our life, and how we can put new meaning to it, to create the lives that we really want to live, all while recognizing through slowing down, self-inquiry, mindfulness, and contemplative practices to really find out who we are at our deepest sense, at our core. And my website is www.amonkst.us.com, amongustus.com. And you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, Jaromyr Kynl, JAROMYR KYNL. There's only 2 Kynyls in all of Canada, my dad and I, so we're pretty easy to find. Yeah, and
We'll put the links at the bottom of the show notes as well. But I highly suggest that you all get on Instagram and follow Yarrow, check out his offerings, listen to his wisdom. It will enrich your life in some way, as you have enriched my life. And I'm so grateful for our friendship and for the beautiful student-teacher relationship that we have, both sides of the hand. So thank you so much for being here, Yarrow. And I look forward to our next conversations.
thanks, Pam.